Hello everyone, welcome back. My name is Reggie. I am a registered mental health counselor intern in the state of Florida, and if you are in this series, then you are studying for your National Clinical Mental Health Counseling exam, and I am reading the 2014 ACA Code of Ethics. For this particular video, we're going to give you a 3-for-1 as these sections are section D, E, and F. D and E are short, so I'm going to do sections D, E, and F in this video. So, without further ado, let's go into the video. This video is for educational purposes only, so if you are studying for your exam, that is the purpose of this video, to go through the Code of Ethics. So let's begin. In section D, relationship with other professionals. Introduction. Professional counselors recognize that the quality of their interactions with colleagues can influence the quality of service provided to clients. They work to become knowledgeable about colleagues within and outside the field of counseling. Counselors develop positive working relationships and systems of communication with colleagues to enhance services to clients. D.1 Relationship with colleagues, employers, and employees. D.1.A Different approaches. Counselors are respectful of approaches that are grounded in theory and or have an empirical or scientific foundation but may differ from their own. Counselors acknowledge the expertise of other professional groups and are respectful of their practices. D.1.B Forming relationships. Counselors work to develop and strengthen relationships with colleagues from other disciplines to best serve clients. D.1.C Interdisciplinary teamwork. Counselors who are members of interdisciplinary teams delivering multifaceted services to clients remain focused on how to best serve clients. They participate in and contribute to decisions that affect the well-being of the clients by drawing on the perspectives, values, and experiences of the counseling profession and those of colleagues from other disciplines. D.1.D Establishing professional and ethical obligations. Counselors who are members of interdisciplinary teams work together with team members to clarify professional and ethical obligations of the team as a whole and of its individual members. When the team decision raises ethical concerns, counselors first attempt to resolve the concern within the team. If they cannot reach resolution among team members, counselors pursue other avenues to address their concerns consistent with client well-being. D.1.E Confidentiality. When counselors are required by law, institutional policy, or extraordinary circumstances to serve in more than one role in judicial or administrative proceedings, they clarify role expectations and the parameters of confidentiality with their colleagues. D.1.F Personnel selection and assignment. When counselors are in a position requiring personnel selection and or assigning of responsibility to others, they select competent staff and assign responsibilities compatible with their skills and experiences. Pretty straightforward. D.1.G Employer policies. The acceptance of employment in an agency or institution implies that counselors are in an agreement with its general policies and principles. Counselors strive to reach agreement with employers regarding acceptable standards of client care and professional conduct that allow for changes in institutional policy conducive to the growth and development of clients. D.1.H Negative conditions. Counselors alert their employers of inappropriate policies and practices. They attempt to effect changes in such policies or procedures through constructive action within the organization. When such policies are potentially disruptive or damaging to clients or may limit the effectiveness of services provided and change cannot be affected, counselors take appropriate further action. Such action may include referral to appropriate certification, accreditation, or state licensure organizations, or voluntary termination of employment. D.1.I Protection from punitive action. Counselors do not harass a colleague or employee or dismiss an employee who has acted in a responsible and ethical manner to expose inappropriate employee policies or practices. D.2. Provision of consultation services. D.2.A. Consultant competency. Counselors take reasonable steps to ensure that they have the appropriate resources and competencies when providing consultation services. Counselors provide appropriate referral resources when requested or needed. D.2.B. Informed consent and formal consultation. When providing formal consultation services, counselors have an obligation to review in writing and verbally the rights and responsibilities of both counselors and consultees. Counselors use clear and understandable language to inform all parties involved about the purpose of the services to be provided, relevant costs, potential risks and benefits, and the limits of confidentiality. Section E. Evaluation, assessment, and interpretation. Introduction. Counselors use assessment as one component of the counseling process, taking into account the client's personal and cultural context. Counselors promote the well-being of individual clients or groups of clients by developing and using appropriate educational, mental health, psychological, and career assessments. E.1. General. E.1.A. Assessment. The primary purpose of educational, mental health, psychological, and career assessment is to gather information regarding the client for a variety of purposes, including, but not limited to, client decision-making, treatment planning, and forensic proceedings. Assessment may include both qualitative and quantitative methodologies. E.1.B. Client welfare. Counselors do not misuse assessment results and interpretations. They take reasonable steps to prevent others from misusing the information provided. They respect the client's right to know the results, the interpretations made, and the basis for counselors' conclusions and recommendations. E.2. Competence to use and interpret assessment instruments. E.2.A. Limits of competence. Counselors use only those testing and assessment services for which they have been trained and are competent. Counselors using technology-assisted test interpretations are trained in the construct being measured and the specific instrument being used prior to using its technology-based application. Counselors take reasonable measures to ensure the proper use of assessment techniques by persons under their supervision. E.2.B. Appropriate use. Counselors are responsible for their appropriate application, scoring, interpretation, and use of assessment instruments relevant to the needs of the client, whether they score and interpret such assessments themselves or use technology or other services. E.2.C. Decisions based on results. Counselors responsible for decisions involving individuals or policies that are based on assessments results have a thorough understanding of psychometrics. E.3. Informed consent and assessment. E.3.A. Explanation to clients. Prior to assessment, counselors explain the nature and purposes of assessment and the specific use of results by potential recipients. The explanation will be given in terms and language that the client or other legally authorized person on behalf of the client can understand. E.3.B. Recipients of results. Counselors consider the client's and/or examinee's welfare, explicit understandings, and prior agreements in determining who receives the assessment results. Counselors include accurate and appropriate interpretations with any release of individual or group assessment results. E.4. Release of data to qualified personnel. Counselors release assessment data in which the client is identified only with the consent of the client or the client's legal representative. Such data are released only to persons recognized by counselors as qualified to interpret the data. E.5. Diagnosis of mental disorders. E.5.A. Proper diagnosis. Counselors take special care to provide proper diagnosis of mental disorders. Assessment techniques, including personal interviews, used to determine client care, for example, locus of treatment, type of treatment, recommended follow-up are carefully selected and appropriately used. E.5.B. Cultural sensitivity. Counselors recognize that culture affects the manner in which clients' problems are defined and experienced. Client social, economic, and cultural experiences are considered when diagnosing mental disorders. E.5.C. Historical and social prejudices in the diagnosis of pathology. Counselors recognize historical and social prejudices in the misdiagnosis and pathologizing of certain individuals and groups and strive to become aware and address such biases in themselves or others. E.5.D. Refraining from diagnosis. Counselors may refrain from making and or reporting a diagnosis if they believe that it would cause harm to the client or others. Counselors carefully consider both the positive and negative implications of a diagnosis. E.6. Instrument selection. E.6.A. Appropriateness of instruments. Counselors carefully consider the validity, reliability, psychometric limitations, and appropriateness of instruments when selecting assessments, and when possible, use multiple forms of assessment, data, and or instruments in forming conclusions, diagnoses, or recommendations. E.6.B. Referral information. If a client is referred to a third party for assessment, the counselor provides specific referral questions and sufficient objective data about the client to ensure the appropriate assessment instruments are utilized. E.7. Conditions of assessment administration. E.7.A. Administration conditions. Counselors administer assessments under the same conditions that were established in their standardization. When assessments are not administered under standard conditions, as may be necessary to accommodate clients with disabilities, or when unusual behavior or irregularities occur during the administration, those conditions are noted in interpretation, and the results may be designated as invalid or of questionable validity. E.7.B. Provision of favorable conditions. Counselors provide an appropriate environment for the administration of assessments, for example, privacy, comfort, and freedom from distractions. E.7.C. Technological administration. Counselors ensure that technologically administered assessments function properly and provide clients with accurate results. Pretty straightforward. E.7.D. Unsupervised assessment. Unless the assessment instrument is designed, intended, and validated for self-administration and or scoring, counselors do not permit unsupervised use. E.8. Multicultural issues, diversity, and assessment. Counselors select and use with caution assessment techniques normed on populations other than that of the client. Counselors recognize the effects of age, color, culture, disability, ethnic group, gender, race, language preference, religion, spirituality, sexual orientation, and socioeconomic status on test administration and interpretation, and they place test results in proper perspective with other relevant factors. E.9. Scoring and interpretation of assessments. E.9.A. Reporting. When counselors report assessment results, they consider the client's personal and cultural background, the level of the client's understanding of the results, and the impact of the result on the client. In reporting assessment results, counselors indicate reservations that exist regarding validity or reliability due to the circumstances of the assessment or inappropriateness of the norms for the person tested. E.9.B. Instruments with insufficient empirical data. Counselors exercise caution when interpreting the results of instruments not having sufficient empirical data to support respondent results. The specific purposes for the use of such instruments are stated explicitly to the examinee. Counselors qualify any conclusions, diagnoses, or recommendations made that are based on assessments or instruments with questionable validity or reliability. E.9.C. Assessment services. Counselors who provide assessment, scoring, and interpretation services to support the assessment process confirm the validity of such interpretations. They accurately describe the purpose, norms, validity, reliability, and applications of the procedures and any special qualifications applicable to their use. At all times, counselors maintain their ethical responsibility to those being assessed. E.10 Assessment Security. Counselors maintain the integrity and security of tests and assessments consistent with legal and contractual obligations. Counselors do not appropriate, reproduce, or modify published assessments or parts thereof without acknowledgement and permission from the publisher. E.11 Obsolete assessment and outdated results. Counselors do not use data or results from assessments that are obsolete or outdated from the current purpose. For example, non-current versions of assessments instruments. Counselors make every effort to prevent the misuse of obsolete measures and assessment data by others. E.12 Assessment construction. Counselors use established scientific procedures, relevant standards, and current professional knowledge for assessment design in the development, publication, and utilization of assessment techniques. E.13 Forensic evaluation. Evaluation for legal proceedings. Un momento, por favor. E.13.A Primary obligations. When providing for forensic evaluation, the primary obligation of counselors is to produce objective findings that can be substantiated based on information and techniques appropriate to the evaluation, which may include examination of the individual and/or review of records. Counselors form professional opinions based on the professional knowledge and expertise that can be supported by the data gathered in evaluations. Counselors define the limits of their reports or testimony, especially when an examination of the individual has not been conducted. E.13.B Consent for evaluation. Individuals being evaluated are informed in writing that the relationship is for the purposes of an evaluation and is not therapeutic in nature, and entities or individuals who will receive the evaluation report are identified. Counselors who perform forensic evaluations obtain written consent from those being evaluated or from their legal representative unless a court orders evaluations to be conducted without the written consent of the individuals being evaluated. When children or adult who lack the capacity to give voluntary consent are being evaluated, informed written consent is obtained from a parent or guardian. E.13.C Client evaluation prohibited. Counselors do not evaluate current or former clients, clients' romantic partners, or clients' family members for forensic purposes. Counselors do not counsel individuals they are evaluating. E.13.D, this is the last part of section E. E.13.E, avoid potentially harmful relationships. Counselors who provide forensic evaluations avoid potentially harmful professional or personal relationships with family members, romantic partners, and close friends of individuals they are evaluating or have evaluated in the past. Section F. Supervision, training, and teaching. Introduction. Counselor supervisors, trainers, and educators aspire to foster meaningful and respectful professional relationships and to maintain appropriate boundaries with supervisees and students in both face-to-face and electronic formats. They have theoretical and pedagogical foundations for their work, have knowledge of supervision models, and aim to be fair, accurate, and honest in their assessment of counselors, students, and supervisees. F.1 Counselor Supervision and Client Welfare. F.1.A Client Welfare. A primary obligation of counseling supervisors is to monitor the services provided by supervisees. Counseling supervisors monitor client welfare and supervisee performance and professional development. To fulfill these obligations, supervisors must meet regularly with supervisees to review the supervisee's work and help to become prepared to serve a range of diverse clients. Supervisees have a responsibility to understand and follow the ACA Code of Ethics. F.1.b. Counselor Credentials. Counseling supervisors work to ensure that supervisees communicate their qualifications to render services to their clients. F.1.c. Informed consent and client rights. Supervisors make supervisees aware of client rights, including the protection of client privacy and confidentiality in the counseling relationship. Supervisees provide clients with professional disclosure information and inform them of how the supervision process influences the limits and confidentiality. Supervisees make clients aware of who will have access to records of the counseling relationship and how these records will be stored, transmitted, or otherwise reviewed. F.2. Counselor Supervision Competence. F.2.a. Supervisor Preparation. Prior to offering supervision services, counselors are trained in supervision methods and techniques. Counselors who offer supervision services regularly pursue continuing education activities, including both counseling and supervision topics and skills. F.2.b. Multicultural issues, diversity in supervision. Counseling supervisors are aware of and address the role of multiculturalism, diversity in the supervisory relationship. F.2.c. Online supervision. When using technology in supervision, counselor supervisors are competent in the use of those technologies. Supervisors take the necessary precautions to protect the confidentiality of all information transmitted through any electronic means. F.3. Supervisory relationship. F.3.a. Extending conventional supervisory relationships. Counseling supervisors clearly define and maintain ethical, professional, personal, and social relationships with their supervisees. Supervisors consider the risks and benefits of extending current supervisory relationships in any form beyond conventional parameters. In extending those boundaries, supervisors take appropriate professional precautions to ensure that judgment is not impaired and that no harm occurs. F.3.b. Sexual relationships. Sexual or romantic interactions or relationships with current supervisees are prohibited. This prohibition applies to both in-person and electronic interactions or relationships. F.3.c. Sexual harassment. Counseling supervisors do not condone or subject supervisees to sexual harassment. F.3.d. Friends or family members. Supervisors are prohibited from engaging in supervisory relationships with individuals with whom they have an inability to remain objective. F.4. Supervisor responsibilities. F.4.a. Informed consent for supervision. Supervisors are responsible for incorporating into their supervision the principles of informed consent and participation. Supervisors inform supervisees of the policies and procedures to which supervisors are to adhere and the mechanisms for due process appeal of individual supervisor actions. The issues unique to the use of distance supervisions are to be included in the documentation as necessary. F.4.b. Emergencies and absences. Supervisors establish and communicate to supervisees procedures for contacting supervisors or, in their absence, alternative on-call supervisors to assist in handling crises. F.4.c. Standards for supervisees. Supervisors make their supervisees aware of professional and ethical standards and legal responsibilities. F.4.d. Termination of the supervisory relationship. Supervisors or supervisees have the right to terminate the supervisory relationship with adequate notice. Reasons for considering termination are discussed, and both parties work to resolve differences. When termination is warranted, supervisors make appropriate referrals to possible alternative supervisors. F.5. Student and supervisee responsibilities. F.5.a. Ethical responsibilities. Students and supervisees have a responsibility to understand and follow the ACA Code of Ethics, Students and supervisees have the same obligation to clients as those required of professional counselors. F.5.B. Impairment. Students and supervisees monitor themselves for signs of impairment from their own physical, mental, or emotional problems and refrain from offering or providing professional services when such impairment is likely to cause harm to a client or others. They notify their faculty and or supervisors and seek assistance for problems that reach the level of professional impairment, and if necessary, they limit, suspend, or terminate their professional responsibilities until it is determined that they may safely resume their work. F.5.C. Professional disclosures. Before providing counseling services, students and supervisees disclose their status as supervisees and explain how this status affects the limits of confidentiality. Supervisors ensure that clients are aware of the services rendered and the qualifications of the students and supervisees rendering those services. Students and supervisees obtain client permission before they use any information concerning the counseling relationship in the training process. F.6. Counseling supervision in evaluation, remediation, and endorsement. F.6.A. F.6.A. Evaluation. Supervisors document and provide supervisees with ongoing feedback regarding their performance and schedule periodic formal evaluative sessions throughout the supervisory relationship. F.6.B. Gatekeeping and remediation. Through initial and ongoing evaluation, supervisors are aware of supervisee limitations that might impede performance. Supervisors assist supervisees in securing remedial assistance when needed. They recommend dismissal from training programs, applied counseling settings, and state or voluntary professional credentialing processes when those supervisees are unable to demonstrate that they can provide competent professional services to a range of diverse clients. Supervisors seek consultation and document their decision to dismiss or referral. I'm getting tired. Oh my God. Supervisors seek consultation and document their decisions to dismiss or refer supervisees for assistance. They ensure that supervisees are aware of options available to them to address such decisions. F.6.C. Counseling for supervisees. If supervisees request counseling, the supervisor assists the supervisee in identifying appropriate services. Supervisors do not provide counseling services to supervisees. Supervisors address interpersonal competencies in terms of the impact of these issues on clients, the supervisory relationship, and professional functioning. F.6.D. Endorsements. Supervisors endorse supervisees for certification, licensure, employment, or completion of an academic or training program only when they believe that supervisees are qualified for the endorsement. Regardless of qualifications, supervisors do not endorse supervisees with whom they believe to be impaired in any way that would interfere with the performance of their duties associated with the endorsement. F.7. Responsibilities of counselor educators. F.7.A. Counselor educators. Counselor educators who are responsible for developing, implementing, and supervising educational programs are skilled as teachers and practitioners. They are knowledgeable regarding the ethical, legal, and regulatory aspects of the profession, are skilled in applying that knowledge, and make students and supervisees aware of their responsibility. Whether in traditional, hybrid, and or online formats, counselor educators conduct counselor education and training programs in an ethical manner and serve as role models for professional behavior. F.7.B. Counselor educator competence. Counselors who function as counselor educators or supervisors provide an instruction within their areas of knowledge and competence and provide instructions based on current information and knowledge available in the profession. When using technology to deliver instruction, counselor educators develop competence in the use of the technology. C. F.7.C. Infusing multicultural issues / diversity. Counselor educators infuse material related to multiculturalism, diversity into all courses and workshops for the development of professional counselors. F.7.D. Integration of study and practice. In traditional hybrid and/or online formats, counselor educators establish education and training programs that integrate academic study and supervised practice. F.7.E. Teaching ethics. Throughout the program, counselor educators ensure that students are aware of the ethical responsibilities and standards of the profession and ethical responsibilities of students to the profession. Counselor educators infuse ethical considerations throughout the curriculum. F.7.F. Use of case examples. The use of client, student, or supervisee information for the purposes of case examples in a lecture or classroom setting is permissible only when A. The client, student, or supervisee has reviewed the material and agreed to its presentation, or B. The information has been sufficiently modified to obscure identity. F.7.G. Student-to-student supervision and instruction. When students function in the role of counselor educator or supervisors, they understand that they have the same ethical obligations as counselor educators, trainers, and supervisors. Counselor educators make every effort to ensure that the rights of students are not compromised when their peers lead experiential counseling activities in traditional, hybrid, and/or online formats. For example, counseling groups, skill classes, clinical supervision. F.7.H. Innovative theories and techniques. Counselor educators promote the use of techniques/procedures/modalities that are grounded in theory and/or have an empirical or scientific foundation. When counselor educators discuss developing or innovative techniques/procedures/modalities, they explain the potential risks, benefits, and ethical considerations of using such techniques/procedures/modalities. F.7.I. Field placements. Counselor educators develop clear policies and provide direct assistance within their training programs regarding appropriate field placement and other clinical experiences. Counselor educators provide clearly stated roles and responsibilities for the students or supervisees, the site supervisor, and the program supervisor. They confirm that site supervisors are qualified to provide supervision in the formats in which services are provided, and inform site supervisors of their professional and ethical responsibilities in this role. F.8. Student welfare. F.8.A. Program information and orientation. Counselor educators recognize that program orientation is a developmental process that begins upon students' initial contact with the counselor education program and continues throughout the educational and clinical training of students. Counselor education faculty provide prospective and current students with information about the counselor education program's expectations, including 1. The values and ethical principles of the profession. 2. The type and level of skill and knowledge acquisition required for successful completion of the training. 3. Technology requirements. 4. Program training goals, objective, and mission and subject matter to be covered. 5. Basis for evaluation. 6. Training components that encourage self-growth or self-disclosure as part of the training process. 7. The type of supervision settings and requirements of the sites for required clinical field experiences. 8. Student and supervisor evaluation and dismissal policies and procedures. And 9. Up-to-date employment prospects for graduates. F.8.B. Student career advising. Counselor educators provide career advisement for their students and make them aware of opportunities in the field. F.8.C. Self-growth experiences. Self-growth is an expected component of counselor education. Counselor educators are mindful of ethical principles when they require students to engage in self-growth experiences. Counselor educators and supervisors inform students that they have a right to decide what information will be shared or withheld in class. F.8.D, addressing personal concerns. Counselor educators may require students to address any personal concerns that they have the potential to affect professional competency. F.9, evaluation and remediation. F.9.A, evaluation of students. Counselor educators clearly state to students prior to and throughout the training program the levels of competency expected, appraisal method, and timing of evaluations for both didactic and clinical competencies. Counselor educators provide students with ongoing feedback regarding their performance throughout the training program. F.9.B, limitations. Counselor educators, through ongoing evaluation, are aware of and address the inability of some students to achieve counseling competencies. Counselor educators do the following. 1. Assist students in securing remedial assistance when needed. 2. Seek professional consultation and document their decision to dismiss or refer students for assistance. And 3. Ensure that students have recourse in a timely manner to address decisions requiring them to seek assistance or to dismiss them, and provide students with due process according to institutional policies and procedures. F.9.C, counseling for students. If students request counseling, or if counseling services are suggested as a part of a remediation process, counselor educators assist students in identifying appropriate services. F.10, roles and relationships between counselor educators and students. And here we go again. F.10.A, sexual or romantic relationships. Counselor educators are prohibited from sexual or romantic interactions or relationships with students currently enrolled in a counseling or related program and over whom they have power and authority. This prohibition applies to both in-person and electronic interactions or relationships. F.10.B, sexual harassment. Counselor educators do not condone or subject students to sexual harassment. F.10.C, relationships with former students. Counselor educators are aware of the power and differential in the relationship between faculty and students. Faculty members discuss with former students potential risks when they consider engaging in social, sexual, or other intimate relationships. F.10.D, non-academic relationships. Counselor educators avoid non-academic relationships with students in which there is a risk of potential harm to the student or which may compromise the training experience or grades assigned. In addition, counselor educators do not accept any form of professional services, fees, commissions, reimbursement, or remuneration from a site for student or supervisor placement. F.10.E, counseling services. Counselor educators do not serve as counselors to students currently enrolled in a counseling or related program and over whom they have power and authority. F.10.F, extending educator-student boundaries. Counselor educators are aware of the power differential in the relationship between faculty and students. If they believe that a non-professional relationship with a student may be potentially beneficial to the student, they take precautions similar to those taken by counselors when working with clients. Examples of potentially beneficial interactions or relationships include, but are not limited to, attending a formal ceremony, conducting a hospital visit, providing support during a stressful event, or maintaining mutual membership in a professional association, organization, or community. Counselor educators discuss with students the rationale for such interactions, the potential benefits and drawbacks of the anticipated consequences for student. Educators clarify the specific nature and limitations of the additional roles they will have with the student prior to engaging in a non-professional relationship. Non-professional relationships with students should be time-limited and/or context-specific and initiated with student consent. F.11, multicultural diversity competence in counselor education and training programs. F.11.A, faculty diversity. Counselor educators are committed to recruiting and retaining a diverse faculty. F.11.B, student diversity. Counselor educators actively attempt to recruit and retain a diverse student body. Counselor educators demonstrate commitment to multicultural diversity competence by recognizing and valuing the diverse cultures and types of abilities that student brings to the training experience. Counselor educators provide appropriate accommodations that enhance and support diverse student well-being and academic performance. F.11.C, and this is the last section, thankfully for me. F.11.C, and this is the last section of this video. Multicultural diversity competence. Counselor educators actively infuse multicultural diversity competency in their training and supervision practices. They actively train students to gain awareness, knowledge, and skills in the competencies of multicultural practice. And that has been section E, D, E, and F of the 2014 ACA Code of Ethics. And if you got this far, bless you. What's left is sections G, H, and I, if I'm not mistaken. So H, and how far does it go? Yes, so E, G, H, and I. I'm just like tongue-tied right now. But thank you for watching this video. Again, my name's Reggie. If you are taking your exam soon, good luck. You got this. And stick around for the next video.